There are differences. There are differences in the ways in which men identify their issues. They tend to, I think, engage in a lot more self-blame, a lot more shame. I think they find it more difficult to find help amongst their friends and amongst their family as well. So they're much more isolated, I think. So in finding a service that that is able to help them, they do experience tremendous relief. I think is one of the first things I notice.
In order to even think about that, it's to have an awareness of what are some of the barriers to help seeking and support for men, and also barriers to help and support seeking for people, somebody who's been sexually victimised or sexually assaulted. So for me, you know, that's one of the ways that I kind of think about this, to understand the whole shame, guilt, sense of mistrust that's around. And so in some ways to try and dispel some of those barriers and put out material and resources that start to do that is really important, because otherwise people couldn't even think about coming to the service. And so it's not just about having a good space or warm space for people to come to, or having warm referrals. It's challenging some ideas about that men should be able to look after themselves, that they should be physically strong, that if a man isn't able to cope with the situation, then you know, there's a comment on him as a person, and it's quite so there's that one. There's the idea around sexual abuse in men, that a male who's sexually abused might go on to offend. So I spend time trying to challenge those ideas to again make it possible. Then to have the understanding that sexual abuse isn't about sexuality, and it doesn't say anything about somebody's sexuality. The particular context may, you know, it's something to be aware of in doing that work. So it might be particular groups of men maybe at more risk of sexual abuse, sexual assault, and so to reach out to those groups of men, be they transgender, be they same-sex attracted men. So it's understanding the barriers, but then also refining material and working out ways to kind of engage with that group. So again, making any material content where it's acknowledging about men's lives, and having material where men are very visible, that it's speaking directly to them, that, you know, on our web resource and in our brochures, and it speaks directly to men. It challenges some of those myths. It's also about having to have conversations with other services who might be referring men, or who might be working with men, or even with their partners around this. And partners are really important for us in that we know that often a partner will be kind of a gatekeeper for men's emotional well-being. Whether that's right or wrong, you know, that's a situation for some people. And so sometimes engaging men is about working and reaching out to partners and providing support to them and providing information for them as well.
Men are engaged with on a whole variety of stages, if you like. A whole range of different resources and mediums are used, from traditional referral sources through to, you know, the latest electronic gadgetry.
The very first thing is we try and target services to promote our service. So things like the men's shed, where we know there's going to be men congregating. There are community choirs and things like that where there are a lot of males. So we do try and first of all target those services with male-specific brochures. From the word go, we try and kind of go to places where we think there are going to be conglomerates of men and make sure we promote our service there.
We get a lot of referrals from other services here, and we work very hard in this region to develop relationships with other services so that they know about us, and so that they ask the question of their clients, and with the intention of going, there's someone who can help. So that development on an organisational level of relationships with all the possible watershed for clients, because, you know, if they're complex, if they've been carrying this stuff for decades, the chances are they'll be bumping into other services along the line. And that's patching the wound, not fixing the problem. come here, maybe we can help with the core problems.
Engaging is the key element at the beginning, obviously, but there are a number of things we can do. The importance of working with people who've been sexually abused or assaulted is that they feel believed and the development of a relationship. And we know that in working with complex trauma, people like Briere and so on will talk about that. So to engage from the beginning is important. At Living Well, we know that responding immediately or as soon as possible, without a sense of urgency, to any request, because you often with men get one chance. There is something that's brought them to allow someone to phone on their behalf, or for them to phone, or them to type a request. They're in the website perhaps. Something has happened and we need to pick on that immediately. So that, I think, time is of the essence if you possibly can get back to people.
Working with men, I will often talk about other men's experiences of fear around accessing support and what they did in being able to sort of, take that big step. Mm-hmm. I think talking about other people's experiences often helps people to sort of normalise how they felt and not sort of be judging themselves and perhaps listening to other more negative voices outside themselves.
It's about making any space they come into as very supportive, engaging, not re-triggering, where it's very welcoming space. So you might have newspapers or other material that they might feel okay about reading, or just so it's kind of positive kind of culture, but then also you don't make it so men's culture that other people don't feel welcome.
We work really hard at making our guys feel safe, and one of the things for most male survivors of sexual assault who feel like people can see into them and see their past, they feel like they're walking around and everyone knows there's something wrong with them, so they feel exposed just as part of their breathing life. So we work really hard at making them feel safe. We stagger sessions so that clients are not sitting together in the waiting room. We really good at not making clients wait. If they arrive, we're ready for them and bring them into the room. Precisely because, particularly here in Canberra, 330,000 population, it's one of the stories here about how often you bump into people in the shopping centre or in the car park or in the middle of town. It just happens a lot here and people are quite aware of it, and it doesn't make them feel safe if it happens here. So we work really hard at doing everything we can to make clients feel that they're not exposed, including, which is why the building has no signs on it. So if they're standing out front having a smoko and someone drove past and saw them having a smoko, they're just standing outside a building having a smoko. They're not standing outside the Rape Crisis Centre having a smoko. Anything we can do to help them maintain their privacy so that they get to decide who they tell and when and how, and it doesn't creep up on them.
And then to be gentle, to be quiet, to be listening, but also explaining. So to acknowledge and hear that people have got something to say and there's a reason they've come to a service which offers counselling around sexual abuse, but also not to have them have to share everything right then. To hold them in that space and to say, we hear you, you've come for a reason, now can I tell you about what I can offer you? This is what Living Well or a private practitioner, we can offer you. I usually say to people, look, you've rung for a reason, is there obviously something's happened to you. Would you like to take a breath for a minute and I'll just tell you about Living Well, what we can offer you while you gather your thoughts. So those on the phone or even in emails, that's a good way. So you provide a fair bit of information, security, so they have knowledge and they will start to feel in control and exert the choices they want. That's the other key point, I think, in engaging, but in any work with people who come to us, is to help people immediately understand that we will help them take control of themselves, that they're not giving over any further control, and the dynamics of the work we do is actually helping them feel in control of it, not it controlling them. And I say that to people in the beginning, and usually I get a big nod or an affirmation over the phone.
You know, the first and foremost principle is safety and respect. So, you know, part of what I think engages men is just having a safe environment that they can walk into, a safe, pleasant environment that has a good feeling about it. And then I think also having safe body language for the therapist to be, the quality of their presence and their attention conveys safety, and their body language. Like, there's a big difference between sitting like this towards, you know, sitting like in a more relaxed state that's conveying that you're relaxed and comfortable. So I think a lot of it is a kind of a non-verbal conveyance of, I'm here for you, I'm safe, I'm attentive to you. So, I mean, I think that's one aspect of it.
If you work at a centre or a service with more than one or two people, in time and appropriate to the person, it's very nice for them to get to know others in the service as well. It's like, it's not pretending it's the family here, but it's about welcoming people to join with others, so that the receptionist, they get to know her or him very well, and certainly other practitioners in the service. Quite often we bump into people in the halls, or even occasionally set it up so that someone will be around as someone comes out, just so that they can meet 2 or 3 people and we can be friendly and supportive, so that they know that they can ring in if they need. Not that we're a crisis service, but if they need to ring, there's other people they feel comfortable to talk to, and also that they just feel welcome in the space, that it's a relaxed, comfortable area where relationships are developed, and so we need to be modelling what we're talking about. Many people come with relationship and communication issues, so engagement is also about modelling a good and caring way to behave.
Here we're very good at creating an environment when people first walk in, that there will be an instant understanding that there's an acceptance of whatever they bring. So we've got posters up, for instance, that show different sorts of composites of families and talk about it happening to men too, and have posters of men who are disclosing sexual assault. We have, you know, posters around people's sexuality, posters around cultural kind of backgrounds. So I think that has to be part of it. We have to have a welcoming space that very clearly and visually says men are very welcome here, because the majority of our counsellors at this service, and I think it's true of most CASAs, are female, even though we do have a male counsellor advocate. But that in itself is another way our organisation makes it easier for men to come here, I think. Not all of them choose to have a male counsellor advocate, but that is sometimes a very telling factor in whether or not men decide to come for counselling, that they know they have that choice, they have some control over who they get to see. And as I said, mostly they've been assaulted by a male, but for some of them that's really important for them to be able to discuss it with another male. There may be issues of shame that they're not able to address with a woman, or they may have been assaulted by a woman. So that's really important, the space.
The men who do access this service or attempt to access the service know that they have a choice of gender in terms of the counsellor. So, you know, some men might say, oh, I wouldn't talk to a woman about this. Or they might say, oh, no, I can talk to a man about this. So it's really important that they have that choice.
I think just what in Gestalt therapy we call being a relational approach, which is being validating, listening really deeply to the client's unique experience, being confirming of how people have got through the adversities they've been through, reflecting back their strengths, that often survivors of abuse don't know about themselves. The other thing that I found paradoxical, I think there's a lot of paradoxes in this work. One of the paradoxes is that when you fully validate someone's ambivalence and mistrust and fear of coming to therapy, that actually builds safety. When you don't expect them to trust you, when you don't expect them to feel safe, but you help someone articulate their feelings of not feeling safe or their feelings of mistrust, and validating that paradoxically builds more safety. You know, when their resistance to coming to therapy can be understood and talked about and appreciated.
Providing an open forum for them to tell their story, letting them know that I can take the information that they're able to give me. So they might say, I think men and women, but men in particular, will gauge, is this therapist able to handle the information that I've got in my head? So giving them information that it's okay to tell their story, giving them information about things like the therapeutic process, so it's as predictable as possible for them. They know what's potentially going to occur in the sessions. That can sometimes get harder before it gets easier, for example. Talking about things and feeling about things are okay. So providing a lot of information about that therapeutic process. Using humour. I think men often use a lot of humour. They use it more than, my observation is they use it more than women do. So joining in with the humour, and it's okay to use lots of language. You know, it's perfectly okay to use that, and I encourage that. It's a way of expressing how a person feels. So I think being open to that, not engaging in any behaviour that minimises a person's response.
Different ways of using language, I think, is an important difference. The use of metaphor. Often men struggle to describe their feelings and describe the things that they're struggling with. So they'll often say, it's like this, or if you prompt them, they'll find something. I find that that's something to listen out for. Another difference, I think, is the pace and tone of those initial conversations. One has to leave room for thought. I think often men take a little while longer to describe their feelings and their circumstances. And as women, we can tend to jump in and try and rescue that situation and give them the words for things. And I've learnt in this service to slow that process down and allow for that space. And when you do, they usually come up with something, you know, that's just right for them. So not rushing that process, I think, is an important one. Using humour, I think, is another difference in working with men. Often it's a way to relax them and to show some ability to look at the funny side of things, which often fellows do, more so than women, I think. Women are much more involved with the seriousness of the occasion in going to counselling, whereas men, I think, do use humour and storytelling a lot more colourfully than women do. But there's always a serious content in that, so it's listening out for that.
We're trying to take a very gentle, non-judgmental and calm sort of approach. We don't, so we try not to react with really strong emotion, like with strong horror or distress to men's stories, because then they have to start worrying about looking after our feelings, and also it sets them up to think, oh, what happened to me was so terrible and awful. I kind of take the opposite track. I try to normalise what they've been through. I mean, having done this for years, there's probably not that many stories I haven't heard, and so being able to accept that in stride, as it were, I think is useful. We try to let them know what's going to happen. So I'm not a big fan of the guy has to blub and scream and wave his arms around, and I will say to the man, look, this is how I work. This is the process that I'm imagining we'll go through. These are the kinds of things we might do, so you can see it all coming. Everything is forewarned. And I try to have a really practical focus. So it's not, I mean, you have to do emotional work with this kind of work. The men have to get to the feelings because that's the guts of the work. But I try to put that in a way so he doesn't sound too touchy-feely. I talk about that as a you know, a biological process where we're sort of built this way, and talk about the mechanisms, the tools, the practicalities of it. So have that kind of focus.
I also let people know that the first session that we'll have what it won't be, and what it won't be is a discussion of what happened and the need for them, or that they must disclose. There's a great belief out in society at the moment that people seem to will be asked to disclose their story of what happened to them, sometimes in great detail, and this will heal them. And at Living Well, we go out of our way to assure people that that is not the case, and in fact we'll stop them because we will help them start to feel comfortable. We need to get to know each other, and in fact there's a range of safety and stability matters that we want to ensure that they have on board before they might want to talk in detail about memories and so on. Depending how it goes, we need to let them know that we're flexible.
I probably don't necessarily think of working with this person who has been sexually abused, because generally there's a lot more to their life than that. So even though that may, because often that's sort of the big red letter issue that other people pick up, and you know, people are referred in the referral process. It's, you know, this man needs to come and see a service because of his experience of sexual assault. Yet he may also be having marital or relationship difficulties, you know, stuff going on with being a parent, just other issues which may intersect at some level with the sexual assault, or may not. So I guess I wouldn't come into it with an assumption that there's this totalising definition of everything in his life through the lens of sexual assault. And I would probably be quite explicit about that in my talking with him and say, I'm not assuming that everything in your life that's happening is because of the sexual assault. In fact, I probably wouldn't use those words, sexual assault, unless he used them, or if I did, we would negotiate how to use those words. But I wouldn't even assume that's what he's there to work on. He may actually be much more focused on trying to get his relationship with his partner right. And that makes perfect sense to me. You know, it's what you're living with in the here and now that you want to get right sometimes before you want to sort that other stuff out.